Donald Trump anticipated the Fox News town hall would be friendly confines, safe territory filled with sympathetic faces and softball questions lobbed by adoring supporters. He had participated in dozens of these events, characterized by waves of applause, standing ovations, and audience members expressing gratitude for his efforts to save America. Consequently, when producers informed him they were inviting Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to provide balance, he merely laughed. Dismissing her as a mere former public defender, he believed he would dismantle her arguments within 10 minutes, assuming she lacked understanding of business, economics, and basic budgeting. What Trump failed to realize, however, was that Crockett had dedicated 3 weeks to meticulously reviewing every single one of his specific proposals. Furthermore, Trump remained unaware that Crockett had formally requested unique technological accommodations for the event. She informed producers that her presentation required specific capabilities, including video playback functionality, high-resolution document projection, and all necessary supporting equipment. Assuming she merely intended to display a handful of basic slides, the production team readily agreed to her demands. However, she arrived at the studio equipped with 6 large presentation boards, 3 expertly compiled video montages, and 47 distinct budget documents, each meticulously tagged with color-coded sticky notes for quick reference. The impending confrontation would prove disastrous for the former president. Precisely 90 minutes after the program commenced, an incensed Trump would abruptly exit the stage during the live broadcast. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Fox News executives would immediately call for an emergency commercial break to manage the unfolding crisis. Simultaneously, social media platforms would erupt with activity, driving the phrase "he promised he lied" to become the #1 trending topic worldwide. On national television, 6 senior citizens, all of whom were confirmed Trump voters, were observed weeping openly as they digested the actual implications of those projected budget documents. This sequence of events illustrated how a public defender originating from Texas effectively taught the American public how to meticulously examine the fine print. This dramatic evening showcased the precise moment campaign rhetoric collided with documented reality, broadcast live across the nation on Fox News. Inside the Manhattan studio of Fox News, the atmosphere crackled with controlled energy on this particular Thursday evening in October. The stage crew performed final checks on lighting setups, while camera operators fastidiously verified their angles and shots. Within the green room, a senior producer carefully briefed the town hall participants regarding the format. These 200 individuals were selected to represent what was deemed real America, a group comprising Florida retirees, Ohio factory workers, military veterans from various branches, small business owners, and educators. This demographic cross-section represented the vital voters who ultimately decide modern elections. Donald Trump arrived at the venue 40 minutes prior to airtime, closely escorted by Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and a small contingent of campaign staff and attorneys. He was dressed in his customary attire, a navy suit, a red tie that extended significantly past his belt, and an American flag pin positioned to perfectly catch the television lights. Expressing high confidence, he told his sons that the evening was going to be excellent while a stylist applied final touches to his makeup. The former president asserted that Fox favored him, the people loved him, and he intended to demonstrate to the audience exactly why the Democrats were a complete disaster. Eric enthusiastically agreed with his father's assessment, predicting that the Congresswoman would be utterly destroyed and giving her perhaps 10 minutes before she became completely overwhelmed. 4 floors below, situated in a significantly smaller preparation room, Jasmine Crockett reviewed her presentation materials one last time. Her chief of staff, Marcus Chen, observed her anxiously as she methodically flipped through the documents with the focused precision of a trial lawyer preparing a critical closing argument. Marcus questioned her assurance regarding this aggressive approach, noting that challenging Trump so directly on Fox News would almost certainly trigger intense personal attacks. Crockett looked up, her expression entirely serene despite the high stakes. "Marcus, I served 6 years as a public defender," she calmly responded. "During that time, I encountered judges who yelled at me, prosecutors who attempted to intimidate me, and defendants who threatened me personally. The prospect of Donald Trump having a tantrum on national television genuinely does not frighten me. When asked what would happen if he chose to walk out, she replied that he could certainly do so, but the documents themselves would remain for the audience to see. Crockett emphasized that the crucial budget numbers did not alter simply because the former president decided to leave the broadcasting room. She then closed the final folder, asking how she appeared. Marcus smiled and remarked that she looked like a prosecutor who was about to secure a major conviction. At exactly 8:55 p.m., security personnel escorted both participants toward the main stage. The studio audience of 200 individuals, representing the nation's significant political divide, had already taken their seats. Some attendees pointedly wore Make America Great Again hats, others donned various vote pins, and most appeared genuinely curious about the forthcoming 2-hour discussion. Bret Baier, the chief political anchor for Fox News, stood positioned at center stage. Having moderated dozens of town halls, presidential debates, and political forums throughout his career, he prided himself on maintaining an image of fairness and asking challenging questions regardless of political party. Tonight, however, he sensed that this reputation would face a rigorous test. A producer called out the 30-second warning to air. Trump responded by rolling his shoulders, slightly loosening his tie, and planting his feet firmly at his podium like a seasoned boxer preparing in his corner. Crockett, conversely, stood at her podium with flawless posture, her hands folded neatly before her, a subtle smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The red tally lights on the cameras blinked to life, signaling that they were broadcasting live. "Good evening," Bret Baier stated, his voice projecting the gravity of a moment he knew analysts would dissect for days to come. "Welcome to this Fox News special town hall, Promises and Policies. Tonight we are joined by President Donald Trump and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett to discuss crucial campaign promises, policy implementation strategies, and their respective records of leadership. We have 200 Americans present with questions and millions more watching this broadcast at home. The format is structured quite simply. We will begin with opening statements, followed by questions from both our live audience and phone-in callers. Mr. President, as the former chief executive, you will deliver your statement first." Trump nodded, gripping the sides of his podium, clearly in his element during a television performance that offered the opportunity to dominate. "Thank you, Bret, and thank you to everyone joining us here and watching at home," he began. His voice immediately adopted that familiar cadence, reflecting the rhythm of an individual who had delivered thousands of public speeches. "I am here tonight because I strongly believe in transparency, accountability, and the right of the American people to know the true facts about my record." He deliberately paused for dramatic effect, looking directly into the primary camera lens. "During my tenure as president, we accomplished more than virtually any administration in American history, achieving the best economy ever, and I truly mean ever, the lowest unemployment rates, and the strongest military. We successfully cut taxes, reduced burdensome regulations, and restored respect for America around the world." Several members of the audience applauded his remarks. Trump audibly fed off the energy, his voice increasing in volume and intensity. "We vigorously protected Social Security, we protected Medicare, and we proudly stood up for American workers against the highly unfair trade practices employed by China. We successfully drained the swamp in Washington, and most importantly, we kept our promises, unlike other politicians who say one thing but do another. I clearly stated what I intended to do, and I executed those plans." This statement elicited significantly more applause from the crowd. Trump was now fully warming up and operating in his comfortable groove. "The fake news media will persistently refuse to tell you this, but I kept significantly more promises than any other president in modern history, and I will readily do it again because that is precisely what America needs right now: leadership, strength, and someone who actually keeps their word." He then pointed forcefully at the camera. This is in stark contrast to the current administration, which has proved to be a complete and total disaster for the country. "However, we are not here to discuss them. We are here to discuss my record, and I am extremely proud of it. Very proud. Thank you." He settled back, visibly satisfied with his opening delivery. The applause from the room was generous, which Crockett mentally estimated represented about 60% of the attendees. Congresswoman Crockett, Bayer said, turning toward her, your opening statement. Crockett leaned slightly toward her microphone. When she began speaking, her voice was relatively quiet, measured, and almost conversational in tone, presenting a sharp contrast to Trump's typical bombast. Thank you, Brett, and thank you to everyone here tonight, she began. She deliberately looked at the audience members, making direct eye contact rather than performing solely for the television cameras. I am not present tonight to attack President Trump personally. I am here for a much simpler purpose, to compare stated promises directly to implemented policies. She then gestured toward the large presentation screen situated directly behind her. I have brought official documents, various budget proposals, and video recordings of specific promises made, and we are going to examine them side by side. This will not involve my interpretations or any partisan spin, but rather just the president's own words and his administration's specific actions. Trump shifted uncomfortably at his podium, frowning slightly at this approach. The American people deserve leaders who honor their commitments, Crockett continued. This is especially true on critical issues that directly impact their daily lives, such as their health care, their retirement security, and their children's future. Tonight, we will objectively examine whether the promises and the policies actually aligned, and if they fail to do so, we will ask the necessary question of why. She paused briefly. That constitutes the entirety of my agenda. No speeches, no personal attacks, just documents and questions. The audience remained uncharacteristically quiet, as this presentation was not what they had initially expected. Thank you to both of you, Bayer said, consulting his detailed notes. Let us begin with our first major topic, Social Security and Medicare. We have several audience members and phone callers with questions on this subject, but first I wish to establish the definitive baseline for this discussion. Mr. President, during your campaigns and your subsequent presidency, what exactly did you promise the American people regarding Social Security and Medicare? Trump did not hesitate in his response. I promised to vigorously protect them, and I did exactly that. Furthermore, I was the only Republican candidate in 2016 willing to publicly state that I will not cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. Everyone else on that stage wanted to cut them. I said no, and as president, I faithfully kept that promise. We did not cut a single penny from those programs. Congresswoman Crockett, your response, Bayer said. Crockett touched a button on the tablet device positioned in front of her. Immediately, the large screen behind her lit up. Let me show you the explicit promise, she stated. On the screen, a vastly enlarged Twitter post appeared, allowing everyone in the audience to read it clearly. It was from @RealDonaldTrump, dated May 7, 2015, stating, I was the first and only potential GOP candidate to state there will be no cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Huckabee copied me. That quote is from 2015, Crockett noted. Now, here is 2016. A video clip played, showing Trump at a major campaign rally, the crowd roaring loudly behind him. I am not going to cut Social Security like every other Republican, and I am not going to cut Medicare or Medicaid, he declared in the clip. Another clip showed Trump during a debate stating, I am going to save Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security without cuts. Have to do it. A specific campaign advertisement was shown next, featuring Trump's voice sounding serious. I will protect Social Security and Medicare. That's a promise. Finally, a clip from 2020 he played, I will never do anything that will jeopardize or hurt Social Security or Medicare. Never. The screen froze on Trump's face, showing his hand raised specifically in emphasis. Those are the clear promises, Crockett stated. She looked directly at Trump. They seem clear, unequivocal, and promise no cuts whatsoever, correct? Trump nodded vigorously. Exactly. And I kept them. Let me now show you the implemented policies, she responded. She clicked her tablet again and a new document appeared on the screen. It was on official Office of Management and Budget letterhead, dense with technical text and tables. The top clearly read Fiscal Year 2018 Budget Proposal. This constitutes your first budget as president, submitted in May 2017, Crockett noted, her voice remaining calm and almost clinical. The camera zoomed in significantly on specific highlighted text. Page 13 under Social Security Programs, she read aloud. Social Security disability insurance reforms, $72 billion in savings over 10 years. She looked up from the document. That represents $72 billion in cuts to Social Security disability. That is an average of $7.2 billion per year taken from the program that directly assists Americans who cannot work due to a documented disability. Trump quickly interrupted her presentation. Those are not cuts. That is simply eliminating waste and fraud. We were making the program more efficient. Let us examine the specifics of how you achieved that efficiency, Crockett responded. She immediately pulled up another page on the screen. The line item read, Eliminate maximum retroactive benefits. Result: when an individual is approved for disability benefits, they currently can receive up to 12 months of back pay. Your proposal explicitly cut that to 6 months. This results in an average loss per person of $7,000. She then pulled up another relevant page. Disability redeterminations requiring beneficiaries to prove they are still disabled more frequently. Estimated impact: 750,000 people removed from disability rolls over the decade because they are not actually disabled. Trump shot back instantly. Some people abuse the system. Mr. President, Crockett's voice remained level. The Social Security Administration's official fraud rate for disability is less than 1%. These specific proposals were not targeting fraud. They were directly reducing benefits for legitimately disabled Americans. She then clicked to the next document. Fiscal Year 2019 Budget. More highlighted sections appeared on the screen. $84 billion in Social Security cuts, $554 billion in Medicare cuts over 10 years. Trump was vigorously shaking his head in denial. Those numbers are wrong, fake news numbers. These numbers are derived directly from the Office of Management and Budget, Crockett stated firmly. This is your OMB. Your staff prepared these documents. Your signature authorized them. She pulled up the signature page on the screen. There, unmistakably, was Donald Trump's highly distinctive and angular scrawl. FY 2020 budget, she continued, pulling up yet another document. $26 billion in Social Security cuts, $845 billion in Medicare cuts. FY 2021 budget, she showed, $130 billion in Social Security cuts, $756 billion in Medicare cuts. She allowed those massive figures to sit on the screen for a moment before stepping back from her podium. Mr. President, you submitted 4 distinct budgets during your tenure as president. Every single one of them proposed substantial cuts to Social Security and Medicare. The total across all 4 years amounts to over $300 billion in Social Security cuts and over $2 trillion in Medicare cuts. The audience was completely silent. Some attendees looked visibly shocked, others clearly angry, and a few were frantically checking their mobile phones, presumably searching for a verification of the documents shown. They were not enacted, Trump insisted stubbornly. Congress didn't pass them, so technically I didn't cut anything. You are technically correct, Crockett readily acknowledged. Congress ultimately blocked your proposed cuts. However, that action does not constitute keeping a promise. That is Congress successfully stopping you from breaking it. Bayer interjected into the tense discussion. We have our first phone caller, Janet from Pensacola, Florida. Janet, you are on the air. A woman's voice came through the speaker system, audibly shaky with emotion. Mr. President, this is Janet Holloway. I am 68 years old. I have multiple sclerosis. I have been on Social Security disability for 6 years. It is all I have, $1,400 a month. Her voice cracked emotionally. I voted for you twice. I believed you when you said you wouldn't touch Social Security. I stood in line for 4 hours in the heat to vote for you because I thought you'd protect people like me. There was a profound pause. The silence within the studio was absolute. Mr. President, why did you try to cut my benefits? Trump leaned in close to his microphone. Janet, we love you. We are protecting you. Those budget proposals were just recommendations, ways to make the system better. Congress has the final say, and they didn't cut anything, so you are safe. Your benefits are safe. But you tried, Janet said, and now she was crying openly. For 4 years you tried. If Congress wasn't there to stop you, I would have lost $7,000. That is 6 months of my rent, Mr. President. That is food, that is medicine, and you promised you wouldn't do it. Janet, I believed you. The call was disconnected. The studio was completely silent. Several audience members could be seen wiping their eyes. Crockett waited a beat, allowing the moment to sink in, then continued. Mr. President, you are currently campaigning for another term, and you are proposing policies that would significantly accelerate Social Security's insolvency. She pulled up another detailed document on the presentation screen. This analysis is from the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, a nonpartisan watchdog group. They analyzed your current major proposals, additional tax cuts, mass deportations that would reduce the workforce paying into Social Security, and tariffs that would increase both inflation and Social Security's cost of living adjustments. The document on the screen displayed stark projections. Under current law, Social Security's trust fund is projected to be depleted in 2034. Under your specific proposals, it would be depleted by 2031, 3 years earlier than otherwise. She highlighted a crucial section. When the trust fund is depleted, benefits must be cut automatically by 23%. That represents a reduction of $400 per month for the average recipient. So you are publicly promising not to cut Social Security, she said, looking directly at Trump, while simultaneously proposing policies that would force massive automatic cuts 3 years earlier than otherwise. Trump's face was notably red now. That is pure speculation. That is just some organization making predictions. It is math, Mr. President. Revenue minus expenses. Your specific proposals concurrently reduce revenue and increase expenses. The math does not lie. Bayer jumped back into the discussion. We have another caller, Robert from San Antonio. Robert. An older male voice, gravelly but strong, came through. Mr. President, this is Robert Hernandez. I am 72. I am a Navy veteran who served on the USS Nimitz. I have stage 3 cancer. Medicare is currently covering my treatments. He paused for emphasis. Are you going to cut my Medicare? Trump's voice was firm. No, Robert, we are not cutting Medicare. These are Democrat lies designed to scare seniors. We love our veterans. We love our seniors. You will be taken care of. Congresswoman, Bayer said, do you want to respond? Crockett immediately pulled up another video clip. This is from March 11, 2024, during an interview with CNBC. The video began playing, showing Trump sitting across from a CNBC anchor. CNBC anchor, there are stark policy differences, but one thing that I think, at least the perception is, that there's not a whole lot of difference between what you think we should do with entitlements and what President Biden is proposing. Very little we can do in terms of cutting spending. Trump in the video, there is a lot you can do in terms of entitlements, in terms of cutting. The video froze right there. Those are your exact words, Crockett said quietly. 7 months ago. A lot you can do in terms of cutting entitlements, which includes Social Security and Medicare. The audience erupted into gasps and murmurs. Several people shouted questions simultaneously. Trump was now on his feet. That is out of context. I was talking about waste and fraud. The interviewer specifically asked about cutting spending, Crockett said. You replied, there is a lot you can do in terms of cutting. That is not out of context. That is your definitive answer. I meant fraud. Then why did you propose $2 trillion in Medicare cuts in your official budgets? Those were provider payments, not beneficiaries. When you cut payments to hospitals and doctors, Mr. President, beneficiaries lose access to care. That is a cut to Medicare. She immediately pulled up official testimony from hospital associations and medical groups. all expressing serious concern that the proposed cuts would force them to stop accepting Medicare patients altogether. Trump jabbed a finger aggressively at her. "You are twisting everything. You are making it sound like I wanted to hurt seniors when I was trying to help them. I am showing your budgets, your proposals, your words. Which specific part am I twisting?" Bayer held up his hand to intervene. "Let us move to our next topic." However, Crockett was not finished. "One more document," she said. She pulled up a comprehensive comparison chart with 2 columns. The left side displayed Trump's promise, complete with direct quotes. The right side featured budget proposal excerpts, line by line, promise by promise. The contradictions were laid bare for all to see. "This is not a policy disagreement," she said. "This is a specific promise made and a specific promise broken 4 separate times. And now you are promising the same thing again while proposing policies that would make the problem exponentially worse." She allowed the detailed chart to remain on the screen. "Americans deserve better." "Let us discuss corruption," Crockett said, transitioning smoothly to her next section, addressing another signature promise. Trump perked up immediately. "Great, let's do it. Because I drained the swamp better than anyone. Let's see it." The screen came alive with a dynamic compilation of Trump rally footage. Massive crowds were shown chanting in unison, "Drain the swamp! Drain the swamp!" Trump appeared on stage pumping his fist, declaring, "We are going to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C. Another clip showed him stating, "I am going to make ethics reforms, real reforms, not like the phonies in Washington." Another declared, "We will not hire lobbyists. We will not let special interests run this country anymore." The video concluded with a key segment from Trump's inauguration speech. "We are transferring power from Washington, D.C. and giving it back to you, the American people." Those were the promises, Crockett stated. January 2017. Now let us look objectively at what actually happened. She pulled up organizational charts. Your cabinet, 23 members. Let us examine a few in detail. The first slide appeared, Ivanka Trump, your daughter. Appointed senior advisor to the president, salary waived, government experience 0, business experience, fashion and branding. A photograph of Ivanka in the West Wing appeared, showing her sitting in on meetings with prominent world leaders. Portfolio assigned, women's economic empowerment, workforce development, job creation, and economic growth. Crockett looked directly at Trump. "Mr. President, is your daughter genuinely the most qualified person in all of America for this critical position?" "She is brilliant. Harvard Business School, incredibly talented." "She is your daughter. That constitutes nepotism." "The anti-nepotism law does not apply to White House staff," Trump shot back aggressively. "That has been legally settled." "Actually," Crockett corrected, "it is not. The Office of Legal Counsel issued an opinion allowing it, but that opinion contradicts the statute's clear language and intent. Regardless of legality, it is still nepotism, hiring family members over more qualified candidates." She pulled up the next slide. "While serving as your advisor, your daughter's business received 18 Chinese trademarks that had been previously denied, including," she highlighted this, "trademarks for voting machines." "Those were routine," Trump insisted stubbornly. "They were granted the exact same week you met with President Xi Jinping at Mar-a-Lago, the same week you reversed your tough stance on China." The next slide appeared, Jared Kushner, your son-in-law. Also appointed senior advisor. Portfolio, Middle East peace, criminal justice reform, opioid crisis, government efficiency, relations with China, relations with Mexico, NAFTA renegotiation. She paused to let that extensive list sink in. "That constitutes the portfolio of an entire cabinet department given to your son-in-law." "Prior experience in Middle East peace negotiations, 0. Trump countered, "He is brilliant. He brokered the Abraham Accords." After receiving a $1.2 billion loan for his family business from Qatar shortly after you changed U.S. policy toward Qatar, she noted. She pulled up the detailed timeline. The loan was finalized 6 months after your administration stopped supporting Saudi Arabia's blockade of Qatar. Those are entirely unrelated. And after leaving the White House, a Saudi sovereign wealth fund invested $2 billion in Mr. Kushner's new investment firm, despite their internal advisors warning the investment was highly risky. She pulled up leaked documents from the Saudi fund on the screen. The due diligence team had specifically said no, but the investment board overruled them at the direct direction of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, with whom your son-in-law had developed a close personal relationship. Trump was visibly fuming at this line of questioning. Jared and Ivanka worked for free. They didn't take salaries. They didn't need salaries, Crockett said quietly. They made millions resulting from their positions. She moved directly to the next section. Let us look at your overall cabinet. A comprehensive chart appeared showing 20 cabinet members with clear check marks next to 11 of them. More than half of your cabinet engaged in documented ethics violations, questionable conduct, or conflicts of interest. She went methodically down the list. Scott Pruitt, EPA Administrator, resigned after 14 separate federal investigations. Highlights include a $43,000 soundproof booth for his office, first-class flights at taxpayer expense, and using his position to secure his wife a Chick-fil-A franchise. Tom Price, HHS Secretary, resigned after spending over $1 million on charter flights, including a $25,000 flight to get to a golf resort. Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary, spent $800,000 on military flights, including using a government plane to view the solar eclipse with his wife. Ryan Zinke, Interior Secretary, subject of 14 federal investigations for conflicts of interest, misuse of resources, and unethical conduct. Wilbur Ross, Commerce Secretary, maintained financial ties to Russian companies while in office, violating his ethics agreement. Betsy DeVos, Education Secretary, failed to properly divest from companies that stood to benefit directly from her policies. With each name, Crockett projected the corresponding official ethics reports, resignation letters, and formal investigation findings on the screen. This is your swamp, Mr. President, the very one you promised to drain. Trump was shaking his head vigorously in denial. Those are minor things, bureaucratic nonsense. We accomplished more than any administration in history. You explicitly promised to hire the best people and drain the swamp, Crockett said firmly. Instead, you hired the wealthiest cabinet in American history with a combined worth of over $4 billion, and many of them used their positions to further enrich themselves. She then pulled up the final critical document. January 20th, 2021. Your last day in office at 1 a.m., you signed an executive order. The order immediately appeared on the presentation screen, revoking Executive Order 13,770. What exactly was Executive Order 13,770? She pulled up the original order. Your own executive order from January 2017, the one you signed with cameras rolling, promising to drain the swamp. It required executive branch appointees to sign an ethics pledge, including a 5-year ban on lobbying and a ban on foreign lobbying forever. On your last day, she said, her voice turning hard now, at 1 a.m. you revoked that order. You literally undrained the swamp on your way out the door. The audience was audibly murmuring at this revelation. Someone clearly shouted from the crowd, "Why did you do that, Trump?" That order had problems, legal problems. The only problem, Crockett stated, was that it prevented your staff from cashing in on their government service, so you removed it for them and for yourself. Bayer desperately tried to intervene again. We have another caller, but Crockett kept pushing forward. You also pardoned Steve Bannon, who defrauded donors in a Build the Wall campaign. Paul Manafort, your campaign chairman, convicted of massive fraud. Roger Stone, convicted of lying to Congress. Michael Flynn, who lied to the FBI. The screen displayed the official pardon list. You systematically pardoned allies who committed crimes either to benefit you or on your behalf. That is not draining the swamp, that is protecting it. I had the constitutional power to do so. Having the power does not make it right, Crockett interrupted cleanly. You promised to end corruption. You promised to hold people accountable. Instead, you pardoned your friends and revoked ethics rules. She pulled up one final video clip. It showed Trump at a rally in Iowa in June 2017, the crowd laughing as he spoke. I love all people, rich or poor, but in those particular positions, I just don't want a poor person. He was talking about his cabinet appointments, joking about how wealthy they all were, Crockett stated. That is your definitive idea of draining the swamp. Replace career public servants with billionaires and family members. The room had gone uncharacteristically quiet again. A woman in the third row could be seen crying silently. Bayer introduced the next caller. We have Maria from Columbus, Ohio on the line. Maria. Yes, hi, I am a high school civics teacher. Her voice sounded steady but audibly frustrated. Mr. President, how am I supposed to teach my students about ethics and government when you hired your daughter with absolutely no relevant experience to work in the White House? How do I explain that? Trump's response was immediate and forceful. Ivanka is incredibly qualified. She went to Penn. She built a successful business. She sold clothes, Maria stated flatly, and you gave her a job doing foreign policy. She was perfect for the role. Mr. President, that is nepotism. It is illegal in most jurisdictions. The only reason it might be legal federally is a technicality, but legal and ethical are not the same thing. I disagree, Trump stated, his volume rising. I hired the best people. Ivanka was one of the best. You hired your family, Maria stated. That is not draining the swamp. That is how dictatorships operate. Bayer jumped in to de-escalate. Let's move on. But Trump was already leaning back into his microphone. That is offensive. Comparing me to a dictator, I did more for this country than any president. Mr. President, Crockett's voice cut cleanly through his. You promised to drain the swamp. The official documents show you made it significantly deeper. Let's discuss American workers, Crockett said. She was clearly hitting her rhythm now, each topic building effectively on the last one. Great, Trump said, appearing to regain some of his footing, because I did more for American workers than any president in history. Let us objectively examine that claim. Video compilation number 3 began playing. It showed Trump at factory after factory, wearing hard hats, shaking hands with workers, declaring, I'm going to bring jobs back to America. American workers first, always. No one will fight for you like I will. Rally footage showed Trump pointing dramatically at the crowd, shouting, The politicians sold you out. They sent your jobs to China, to Mexico, to anywhere but here. I am bringing them back. The video ended. Those were the promises, Crockett stated. Now let us look at the implemented policies. First, the trade war. She pulled up an official Federal Reserve study. Your administration imposed tariffs on $380 billion worth of imports. The stated goal, protect American jobs and bring manufacturing back. The result? She highlighted the definitive findings. Tariffs functioned as a direct tax increase on American consumers and businesses. Total cost to Americans, $80 billion. Average per household, $831 per year. But what about jobs? Trump interjected quickly. Tariffs brought jobs back. Let us check the data. Crockett pulled up official manufacturing data on the screen. Under your administration, before COVID-19, the United States lost 180,000 manufacturing jobs. 18 major factories closed during your presidency. The trade war didn't bring jobs back. It explicitly cost jobs. She zoomed in significantly on one specific state. Pennsylvania. You won this state by 44,000 votes. You promised to save manufacturing. What happened? Detailed data appeared on the screen. Pennsylvania lost 2,300 manufacturing jobs from 2017 to 2019. Michigan, you won by 11,000 votes, promising to save the auto industry. More data appeared. Michigan lost 8,900 manufacturing jobs in the same period. Wisconsin, won by 23,000 votes, same promise. Lost 6,100 manufacturing jobs. These are official Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers, she emphasized. Not opinions, not projections, actual job losses. Trump was vigorously shaking his head again. Those are cherry-picked. Overall unemployment was at record lows. Because of service industry jobs, Crockett corrected. The manufacturing jobs you specifically promised to bring back did not come back. They kept leaving. She pulled up specific, high-profile examples. Carrier, remember Carrier? Video footage played showing Trump at a Carrier plant in Indiana in December 2016, stating, "I am not going to let companies leave anymore. They are not going to leave. Those jobs are staying here." What actually happened? Crockett showed recent news articles. Carrier closed the plant in 2019 and moved production to Mexico. 600 jobs lost. General Motors, you tweeted in November 2018 that you were very disappointed GM was closing plants, saying there would be consequences. GM closed 5 plants anyway, 14,000 workers laid off. One by one, the definitive examples piled up. Plants closed, jobs lost, promises broken. But I got USMCA, Trump insisted, referencing his renegotiated trade deal with Mexico and Canada. That was huge. USMCA, Crockett acknowledged, was 95% the same as NAFTA. The International Trade Commission officially estimated it would add 0.1% to GDP and create 28,000 jobs over 6 years. She allowed that relatively small number to sit on the large screen. You promised millions of jobs. You delivered 28,000, spread over 6 years. That is approximately 4,600 jobs per year in a national workforce of 160 million people. Next, the tax cuts. You promised tax cuts specifically for the middle class, Crockett stated. A video montage played of Trump promising the biggest tax cut ever, that middle-class families will see huge relief and your paycheck will go up. Let us look objectively at who actually benefited. She pulled up a detailed analysis from the Tax Policy Center. A graph clearly showed the distribution of benefits from the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. 83% of the benefits went to the top 1% of earners. She highlighted the precise numbers. Average tax cut for someone making $1 million or more, $69,000 per year. Average tax cut for a middle-class family, $930 per year. That is 74 times more benefit for millionaires than for middle-class families. That is because rich people pay more taxes, Trump retorted. You specifically promised tax cuts for the middle class, Crockett countered. You delivered tax cuts for the wealthy. Finally, the national debt. You promised to eliminate the national debt entirely, called yourself the king of debt, and said you would pay it off in 8 years. She pulled up Trump's own words from the campaign. "I am a very big person when it comes to debt. We are going to pay it all off." What actually happened? A dramatic chart appeared on the screen detailing national debt levels from 2017 to 2021. When you took office, $19.9 trillion in debt. When you left office, $27.7 trillion. Increase, $7.8 trillion. She allowed that enormous number to hang silently in the air. Before COVID-19, before the necessary pandemic response, the debt had already increased by $3.3 trillion in just 3 years. That is the largest increase of any president in their first 3 years ever. But we cut taxes, Trump argued. We stimulated the economy. You cut revenue without cutting spending, Crockett stated. That is not fiscal responsibility, that is running up the credit card. The phone lines were completely lit up. Bayer took another call. James from Flint, Michigan. James? A working-class voice, audibly weary, came through. Mr. President, this is James Kowalski. I am a machinist, was a machinist. You came to our plant in 2016, told us you would save our jobs, told us no one would fight for us like you. There was a heavy pause. The plant closed in 2019. 300 jobs all went to Mexico. Where were you? Trump leaned forward into his podium. James, that is terrible. But that is the governor's fault. Democratic governor, terrible policies. The state government failed you. You promised you would stop it, James stated flatly. You said you wouldn't let companies leave, but they left anyway. James, I can't control every single company. You promised you could. You said they are not going to leave. They are not going to leave, but they did. And now I am 54 years old trying to compete with 30-year-olds for jobs that pay half what I used to make. The call disconnected. Crockett looked directly at Trump. Under your administration, 1,800 manufacturing facilities closed. That is not protecting workers. That is the exact opposite. Trump was visibly red-faced now, his typical composure clearly cracking. I created the best economy ever, lowest unemployment. You can't deny that. I am not denying unemployment was low, Crockett stated. I am showing that your specific promises to specific workers, manufacturing workers, coal miners, steel workers, those promises were not kept. The jobs did not come back. The plants still closed. She immediately pulled up one more crucial document. And now you are proposing policies that would make it even worse. More tariffs, mass deportations that would remove millions of workers from the labor force. These policies, according to 16 Nobel Prize-winning economists, would increase inflation and reduce overall economic growth. Nobel Prize winners, Trump scoffed dismissively. They are all liberals. They are economists doing math, Crockett responded. And the math says your policies would hurt the very workers you claim to protect. Crockett paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. This next section was deeply personal for her. She had dedicated hours to interviewing veterans, reading testimonies, and meticulously documenting the significant gap between Trump's rhetoric and his actual policies regarding veteran care. One more topic, she stated. Veterans. Trump perked up immediately, seemingly energized by the subject. I love veterans. I did more for veterans than any president in history. Let us examine that claim. The video compilation began playing. It showed Trump at various military bases, VA hospitals, and veterans events, proclaiming, "No one loves veterans more than me. I will protect the VA. Veterans will be treated like the heroes they are. We will have the best VA, the best health care for our heroes." The video concluded on Trump's face, his hand over his heart, standing at a military cemetery. Those were the promises, Crockett stated. Then she pulled up the actual budgets again. Fiscal year 2018, your proposed budget for Veterans Affairs. The official document appeared clearly on the screen. She highlighted a critical section. $10.7 billion in cuts to the VA over 10 years. Trump started to interrupt, but she pressed forward over his objection. Fiscal year 2019, $13.1 billion in cuts. Fiscal year 2020, $17.3 billion in cuts. FY 2021, $11.6 billion in cuts. 4 years, 4 budgets. Every single one of them proposed cutting VA funding. Those are cuts to overhead, Trump insisted loudly, not to veterans themselves. Let us examine the specifics of where those cuts were targeted, Crockett responded. She immediately pulled up the detailed line items on the screen. Cuts to VA healthcare services, cuts to disability payments, cuts to education benefits, cuts to vocational rehabilitation programs. She zoomed in significantly on one specific impactful section. Proposal to eliminate individual unemployability benefits. This is the specific program that assists veterans who are too disabled to work but have not yet been officially rated 100% disabled. Estimated impact, 225,000 veterans lose an average of $1,500 per month. We were reforming the system, Trump declared defensively. You are cutting critical benefits, Crockett stated flatly. And while concurrently cutting benefits, you were aggressively pushing privatization, sending veterans to private doctors instead of specialized VA hospitals. She pulled up official data regarding VA wait times. You explicitly promised to reduce wait times for care. What actually happened? A dramatic graph appeared on the screen showing wait times steadily increasing from 2017 to 2020. Wait times went up, not down. This occurred because you didn't adequately fund the private care program you created. Veterans were stuck in limbo, unable to get timely care at the VA and unable to get approved for private care. The phone lines were completely lit up again. Bayer glanced down at his screen. "We have Sergeant David Wilson calling from North Carolina. Sergeant Wilson." "Good evening." The voice was controlled, military crisp, but carried an undeniable undercurrent of steel. "This is Gunnery Sergeant David Wilson, United States Marine Corps, retired, 2 tours in Afghanistan." "Go ahead, Sergeant," Bayer said. "Mr. President, I use VA healthcare for PTSD and service-related injuries. I watch the news. I hear you talk about loving veterans. Then I see these actual budget documents Congresswoman Crockett is showing on the screen." There was a heavy pause. "Why did you try to cut VA funding 4 years in a row?" "Sergeant, we didn't cut anything," Trump insisted. "We increased VA funding significantly." "You proposed massive cuts," Wilson stated, his voice hardening noticeably. "Congress stopped you from enacting them. That is entirely different." "We made the VA exponentially more efficient." "Mr. President," Wilson interrupted cleanly, "I have another question. In July 2015, you stated publicly that John McCain wasn't a war hero because he was captured. You explicitly said, 'I like people who weren't captured.' Senator McCain spent 5.5 years as a prisoner of war. He famously refused early release because other prisoners who had been held longer should go first according to the code. He was tortured mercilessly and remained permanently injured from his service." The studio went completely silent at this recollection. "Is that how you show respect for veterans, sir, by mocking prisoners of war?" Trump's face visibly went through a rapid series of expressions: anger, defensiveness, and calculated political maneuvering. "I have great respect for Senator McCain's service, but he was a bad senator. He voted aggressively against our agenda." "That is not what I asked you, sir," Wilson stated firmly. "I asked if mocking POWs is how you show respect for veterans." "I didn't mock POWs. The media took that entirely out of context." "Mr. President, I watched the raw video. You said, 'He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that were not captured.' Those were your exact words." Crockett was already pulling up the undeniable video footage. It showed Trump at a campaign event in Iowa in July 2015. The clip played, his voice unmistakable and clear. "He's not a war hero. He is a war hero because he was captured. I like people that were not captured." The video ended on that definitive note. "That is entirely out of context," Trump insisted stubbornly, but his voice had lost its characteristic certainty. "There is significantly more," Crockett said quietly. She pulled up a highly controversial article. The Atlantic, September 2020. Multiple high-level sources confirmed you referred to fallen soldiers as losers and suckers. "Lies," Trump exploded furiously. "A total, absolute fabrication." General John Kelly, your own chief of staff, confirmed the accuracy of those statements. "He is lying." Multiple senior military officials confirmed it independently. "They are all lying." You famously skipped a visit to a military cemetery in France because it was raining that day. The Secret Service said. "You called fallen Marines suckers for getting killed." "I never said that." But the political damage was already done. The audience had watched the undeniable videos, heard the flimsy denials, and witnessed Trump's fury building rapidly. Sergeant Wilson's voice came back strongly through the speakers. "Mr. President, I served with men who died for this country. I have personally held dying Marines in my arms, and you call them suckers? I didn't. You mock POWs. You try to repeatedly cut VA funding. You say you love veterans, but your actions, sir, say something else entirely." The phone line went dead with a definitive click. The studio was absolutely silent. In a highly dramatic moment, several veterans present in the audience stood up and silently walked out of the town hall. Cameras captured their backs as they exited the venue. Some wore military service caps. One woman in a wheelchair departed holding a meticulously folded American flag in her lap. Trump was now standing fully upright, gripping his podium with intense force. This is a setup. This whole thing is a total setup. Mr. President, Bayer desperately tried to intervene to maintain control. No, this is far worse than CNN. Fox set me up. You brought me here specifically to ambush me. Crockett had not moved an inch from her original position. Mr. President, these are your official budgets. These are your own words captured on video. These are your administration's policies. Which specific part of this constitutes a setup? All of it. You are twisting everything. I am showing definitive documents. Fake documents from your Office of Management and Budget. Then they were fundamentally wrong. They carry your official signature, sir. I sign hundreds of things. I don't read every single page. The audience visibly gasped at this stunning admission. Several people immediately started shouting questions at the former president. Crockett's voice cut cleanly through the noise, quiet but devastatingly clear. You sign official government budgets without reading them? Trump instantly realized the gravity of his mistake. I meant, that is not what You just said you don't read what you sign. I have people who... So when you explicitly promised to protect Social Security, protect Medicare, and protect veterans, you didn't actually know what was contained in your own budgets. Trump was now completely floundering on stage. This is all taken entirely out of context. This is all another, Bayer interjected, taking another caller. An elderly woman, Margaret from Scottsdale, Arizona. Mr. Trump. Her voice sounded thin, fragile with advanced age. I am 81 years old. I am solely on Social Security. That is all I have. My husband passed away 3 years ago. The Social Security survivor benefits are all that keeps me in my apartment. A shaky breath was audible. I voted for you specifically because you promised not to touch Social Security. I believed you. Did you lie to me? Trump's voice was noticeably softer now, almost pleading with the caller. Margaret, no, I didn't lie. I protected you. You tried to cut it 4 separate times. Those were recommendations. Did you lie to me? The question hung heavy in the air, sounding like a definitive accusation. Trump's composure finally shattered completely. I didn't lie to anyone. This whole thing is rigged. Brett, you brought me on here specifically to ambush me with fake documents and lying phone callers. Mr. President, Bayer started to speak. I am done with this, Trump stated emphatically. He reached aggressively for his lapel microphone and started unhooking it with force. This is fake news, all of it. Sir, you agreed to the format of this town hall. I don't care what I agreed to. The microphone came free and Trump threw it forcefully onto the podium. This is a total disaster. Fox News is dead to me. Dead! He stormed furiously toward the stage exit. Eric and Don Jr. immediately materialized from the wings, flanking him as they departed. Bayer looked absolutely stunned, standing motionless at center stage. The television cameras seemed not to know where to point, at Trump's retreating back, at the now empty podium, at Crockett standing calmly at hers, or at the audience sitting in completely shocked silence. We are going to take a quick break, Bayer finally managed to say. We will be right back. The screen immediately cut to a commercial. During the commercial break, the studio erupted into complete and total chaos. Producers were frantically shouting into headsets, and camera operators were arguing intensely about exactly what footage they had captured. Audience members were clustered on their mobile phones, some visibly crying, others arguing fiercely with each other about the events. At her podium, Crockett remained perfectly still. She was reviewing her detailed notes as if nothing unusual whatsoever had happened. Marcus Chen rushed onto the stage to meet her. That was incredible. Did he really just walk off Fox News? Apparently, Crockett replied calmly. Do you realize what this means? It means Americans finally saw his actual budgets and his verbal promises side by side, and he had absolutely no answer. It means you just effectively ended his entire campaign. Crockett looked up at Marcus. His policies ended his campaign. I just showed them to the public. Bayer approached her, looking visibly frazzled by the chaotic turn of events. Congresswoman, we are back live in 60 seconds. President Trump has made the decision not to return to the stage. Would you be willing to continue taking questions from the audience? Of course, she readily agreed. You understand this situation is unprecedented. So is a president proposing to cut Social Security 4 separate times after promising not to touch it. Exactly 60 seconds later, they were broadcasting live again. Bayer faced the camera, trying desperately to project a sense of normalcy and control. We are back. As you just witnessed, President Trump has decided to leave the town hall early. Congresswoman Crockett has agreed to continue taking questions from our audience and phone-in callers. He turned toward her. Congresswoman, your thoughts on exactly what just transpired here? I think Americans just witnessed a leader unable to defend his actual record, Crockett said simply. When confronted directly with his own budgets, his own proposals, and his own words captured on video, he had absolutely no answer except to claim that everything was fake. But official government budgets are not fake. Policy proposals are not fake. His personal signature on those definitive documents is not fake. The audience had quieted down significantly now. They looked uncertain, unsure how to process exactly what they had just witnessed. Let's take some questions, Bayer said, attempting to move forward. Linda from the audience, you had your hand up. A woman in her 60s stood up, accepting the microphone in hand. Congresswoman, I am a retired nurse. I have voted Republican my entire life. I voted for President Trump twice. Her voice noticeably wavered with emotion. Why do politicians consistently promise one thing and then do the complete total opposite? Crockett's expression immediately softened. That is the fundamental question, isn't it? I believe it happens because politicians count on people not reading the fine print. They count on people not watching what they actually do and only listening to what they say. They make glowing promises on the campaign trail that sound excellent, then govern entirely differently because they assume no one is paying close attention. But we absolutely should pay attention. You should always verify everything. Don't just listen to the inspiring speeches, Crockett stated directly. Read the actual budgets, look closely at the voting records, check if the actions match the words. Tonight I specifically showed you documents because documents do not lie. Budgets are policy priorities in writing. They definitively show what someone actually values versus what they merely say they value. But how do we know who to trust? The woman asked. Trust is earned through consistency, Crockett responded. When someone's words and actions align year after year, that is trustworthy. When they promise not to cut Social Security, then propose cuts in every single budget for 4 years, that tells you something crucial. Another audience member, a younger man, stood up to ask a question. What can regular people actually do? We are not all lawyers who possess the ability to read complex budget documents. The documents are public, Crockett stated firmly. Congressional Budget Office analyses are written specifically for the general public. Non-profit watchdog groups actively translate budget proposals into plain English. The information is available. We just have to make the effort to look for it. A woman wearing a Make America Great Again hat stood up to speak. This whole thing felt like a total setup, like you came here tonight just to attack him. Ma'am, I showed his budgets, his proposals, and his own words on video. If that feels like a personal attack, perhaps the problem isn't the messenger but the content of the message itself. But you are a Democrat. Of course you would make him look bad. These are inherently nonpartisan documents, Crockett stated firmly. The Office of Management and Budget serves whoever is currently president. The Congressional Budget Office is strictly nonpartisan. The Federal Reserve studies I showed are objective economic analysis, not political opinion. She paused briefly. I understand loyalty. I understand wanting to support someone you voted for. But loyalty shouldn't mean accepting broken promises. It shouldn't mean ignoring when actions directly contradict words. The woman slowly sat down, looking visibly troubled. Bayer took another call. We have Robert from earlier. Robert, you're back on the line. The Navy veteran's voice returned, sounding gravelly but resolute. Yes, I wanted to say something. I served this country for 8 years. I took a solemn oath to support and defend the Constitution. That oath meant telling the truth, even when doing so was incredibly hard. I am 72 now, I have cancer, and Congresswoman, what you did tonight, showing those actual documents, asking the hard questions, that constitutes patriotism. That is truly defending the Constitution. His voice hardened perceptibly. President Trump walking off that stage when confronted directly with his own record? That is cowardice. Thunderous applause erupted from about a third of the audience. Another third sat in stony, angry silence. The final third appeared deeply conflicted. Crockett's phone was buzzing constantly now. She glanced down at it once, seeing hundreds of messages, trending hashtags, and urgent news alerts, before immediately turning it face down. "Final thoughts, Congresswoman?" Bayer asked. Crockett looked directly at the main camera lens. Tonight was not fundamentally about Republican versus Democrat. It was about promise versus reality. Every American, regardless of their political party, deserves leaders who keep their word. This is especially true on crucial issues that affect their daily lives, their health care, their retirement security, and their children's future. If someone promises to protect Social Security, then tries repeatedly to cut it, that is a broken promise. If someone promises to drain the swamp, then hires family members and pardons corrupt allies, that is a broken promise. If someone promises to protect veterans, then proposes cutting VA funding 4 separate times, that is a broken promise. The official documents I showed tonight are public and available to everyone. Read them yourself. Check the facts. Don't take my word for it. Don't take any politician's word for it. Verify. She deliberately paused. Democracy requires informed citizens. Tonight I attempted to inform. What you choose to do with that information is entirely up to you. The broadcast concluded at 10:47 p.m., exactly 43 minutes ahead of its scheduled end time. Within minutes, social media platforms exploded with activity. "He promised he lied" hit the #1 trending spot worldwide, accumulating over 2.3 million tweets in the first hour alone. "Read the Budget" trended at #2 and Crockett receipts at #3. Video clips from the event were everywhere, dominating online discourse. Most people would never watch the full 2-hour broadcast, but they all saw the key moments. They saw Janet from Florida crying about her disability benefits. They saw Trump stating, "I sign hundreds of things. I don't read every single page." They saw Sergeant Wilson asking if mocking prisoners of war was how Trump showed respect. They saw Margaret asking the poignant question, "Did you lie to me?" And they saw Trump ripping off his microphone and angrily storming off the stage. Cable news networks ran these clips on a continuous loop. Every network covered it, even Fox. CNN's bottom screen chyron read, "Trump walks off Fox News after confronted with budget proposals." MSNBC's read, "Crockett uses Trump's own documents to fact-check promises." And even Fox News, appearing somewhat shell-shocked by the evening, reported, "Contentious town hall ends early as Trump departs." The New York Times homepage by midnight featured the headline, "With budgets and videos, Crockett methodically dismantles Trump's claims." The Washington Post reported, "Trump storms off Fox after failing to defend record." Trump's Truth Social feed became a dynamic meltdown in real time. At 12:03 a.m., "Rigged. Total setup by Fox News. They are worse than CNN now." At 12:17 a.m., "Crockett is a liar. Those budgets were fake. My administration protected Social Security." At 12:29 a.m., "The callers were actors paid by Democrats. The whole thing was staged. Fox News is dead to me. I made them what they are, and this is how they repay me." But notably absent from his feed was any specific refutation of the actual documents shown, any explanation for the budget proposals, or any defense of the actual implemented policies. There was just raw rage and accusations of unfair treatment. Congressional offices across the country were immediately flooded with phone calls. Seniors demanded to know if their Social Security benefits were actually safe. Veterans asked urgent questions about VA funding. Workers wanted explanations regarding trade policies. The House Budget Committee quickly announced hearings regarding truth in budget proposals. Every member of Congress received copies of Trump's four budgets with the proposed cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and the VA clearly highlighted. New legislation was drafted titled the Truth and Promises Act. This bill required presidential candidates to submit detailed policy proposals demonstrating exactly how their campaign promises would be funded if elected. If an elected official's official budgets directly contradicted their campaign promises, an automatic congressional review would be triggered. Poll numbers began to shift rapidly. Trump's support among voters 65 plus dropped 8 points. Support among veterans dropped 11 points. Support among working-class voters in key swing states dropped 6 points. His overall approval rating dropped 7 points. The town hall immediately became a definitive case study analyzed in political science classes, law schools, and high school civics courses nationwide. The following week, Trump held a rally in Des Moines, Iowa on a cold March evening. Before the town hall event, Trump rallies routinely filled arenas with 15,000 to 20,000 people, with overflow crowds waiting outside in lines stretching for blocks. Tonight, he was in a high school gymnasium with a total capacity of 3,500 tars. The bleachers were only half full, with perhaps 1,800 people in attendance. Campaign staff had scrambled desperately to fill seats, giving away free tickets and calling every contact on their lists, but still couldn't fill the venue. The local news noted the lower attendance in their coverage, not making it the main headline, but everyone noticed. Trump took the stage, and the old energy was present, sort of, but something felt fundamentally different. Iowa, great to be back in Iowa. We love Iowa, don't we? There was applause, but it sounded scattered, not the thunderous roar he was accustomed to. He launched directly into his standard speech. We had the best economy ever, the absolute best. Everyone says so. A single voice from the crowd cut cleanly through the rhetoric. What about Social Security? Trump froze just for a brief second, but the cameras caught the hesitation. We protected Social Security, his voice stated, sounding defensive. Another voice shouted, you tried to cut it 4 times. Security personnel moved immediately toward the hecklers, but they were not causing a physical scene. They were simply holding up signs. The cameras found them and zoomed in. The signs read, show us the budgets. We read the documents. Promises equals policies. These were not young protesters dressed in black hoodies. They were seniors, gray-haired, some using walkers and some actually wearing Make America Great Again hats while concurrently holding signs calling Trump a liar. His own base was holding him accountable. Trump tried to continue his speech. Look, the fake news tried to make it look like... An older woman stood up. She was perhaps 75 years old, wearing a cardigan, her hair in a neat bun, not shouting, just standing and holding a sign high enough for everyone to see clearly. It read, Janet from Florida, you lied to me. Trump saw the sign and his face visibly changed. The characteristic bravado cracked for just a brief moment. He knew exactly who she represented. The callers from that fateful night, the ones who had believed him. Ma'am, his voice was quieter now. I never lied to you. She didn't sit down, didn't respond, just stood there silently holding the sign high. It was silent testimony. 3 more people stood up, then 5, then a dozen more signs appeared throughout the gymnasium. Marine veteran, show me the VA budget. Read the CBO report. We are not fooled anymore. You promised we checked. Trump's team was panicking, visible in the wings. Remove them. They were peaceful. Ignore them. Every camera in the gymnasium was focused intensely on them. Trump made a decision. You know what? I don't need to be here listening to this. He pointed dramatically at the sign holders, his voice rising in anger. These people, they have been poisoned by the media, by people like Jasmine Crockett who lie about my record. But his voice possessed no real power now. The crowd wasn't responding enthusiastically. Even his supporters in the gym looked uncomfortable. Someone yelled clearly from the back of the room, She showed your budgets, your actual budgets. Trump tried to pivot. Let me tell you about the economy. But he couldn't find his comfortable rhythm. He kept glancing nervously at the sign holders. They were still standing, still silent, still there. Their signs were not inflammatory, they were not profane, they were just factual and damning. He cut his speech extraordinarily short, speaking for only 23 minutes when usually he went for 90. "Thank you, Iowa. We are going to make America great again." The usual closing line, but tonight it sounded hollow. He exited the stage quickly. There was no rope line, no shaking hands with supporters, no selfies. He was just gone. The cameras followed him all the way to the parking lot. His motorcade pulled away, passing a small group of protesters assembled outside. They were not thousands, maybe 30 people in total. But they were all seniors, and they were all holding the exact same signs. "We read the budgets." Now, through the tinted window of his SUV, Trump's face was visible for just a fleeting moment. He saw them, then quickly looked away. The vehicle sped up. The local news that night did not make the rally the lead story. It was their third item, placed after a barn fire and a school board meeting. President Donald Trump held a rally today. Attendance was significantly lower than expected. Several attendees interrupted the speech, citing concerns about budget proposals from his presidency. The story got 15 seconds, then they moved on to sports, but that, in essence, was the story. It wasn't dominating news anymore. Trump rallies used to dominate media coverage for hours on end. Now it was just a footnote. The real story was contained in the empty seats, in the signs held by his own voters, in the speech cut short, and in the quick, unceremonious exit. It was not dramatic, not explosive, just diminished. One text message leaked to Politico that week, sourced from a senior campaign staffer, confirmed the shift. "He won't talk about Social Security anymore, just gets angry if anyone brings it up. Says, don't let anyone ask about Crockett. We had to cancel 2 town halls this month. Too risky, can't control the questions." The text was verified and published. Trump publicly called it fake news, but it rang true to everyone watching. Everyone could see the reality of the situation. Fox News still covered Trump, but noticeably differently. Sean Hannity still defended him, but even Hannity now prefaced segments by saying, "Look, on the Social Security budget issue, the documents were real. We have fact-checked them ourselves. He should address that directly." Jimmy. Brett Bayer's show began featuring regular promise versus policy graphics, showing split-screen comparisons of campaign statements and legislative records. They didn't explicitly call it the Crockett method, but everyone understood that's exactly what it was. Late-night comedians made the admission a running joke. Trump announced a new policy today. Wait, let me check if he actually read it first. Cue audience laughter. He's promising to protect health care. Quick, someone check what his actual budget says. More laughter. SNL performed a cold open featuring Alec Baldwin as Trump blindly signing documents. An aide asks, "Sir, do you know what you're signing?" Baldwin as Trump responds, "I sign hundreds of things. I don't read every single page." It became a meme. It became shorthand for a fundamental flaw. It became a permanent part of the story about him, not the only story, but a significant part of the tapestry, part of why people doubted him. There was no single definitive moment when Trump lost, no dramatic collapse, no perp walk, no televised confession. It was just erosion. Rally crowds grew steadily smaller. Poll numbers drifted consistently lower. Donors became more hesitant to contribute. The media grew increasingly more skeptical, and voters grew more cautious. The town hall wasn't the sole reason for this shift, but it was part of the developing pattern, part of the narrative that formed when people asked, "Can we genuinely trust him?" Someone would inevitably say, "But remember that Fox News town hall? Remember the budgets? Remember, I don't read every single page?" And the doubt would creep in. Janet Holloway's Facebook group, titled "Seniors Who Read Budgets," grew steadily over time. It didn't reach 50,000 members, but it grew to 3,500 members spanning 15 different states. They met regularly at local libraries, teaching each other how to access Congressional Budget Office reports, how to decipher complex line items, and how to verify claims made by politicians. They called themselves the receipt readers. Sergeant David Wilson formally testified before the House Veterans Affairs Committee. The Veterans Promise Protection Act passed with significant bipartisan support in the Senate, 81 to 17. The bill required any budget proposal cutting VA funding to include detailed explanations and formal testimony from various veterans groups. When President Biden subsequently signed it into law, Wilson stood positioned directly behind him. Afterward, the pen the president used went directly to Wilson. He kept it in a shadow box display positioned next to his Purple Heart. Maria Sanchez's Promises versus Policies curriculum spread to 47 school districts across 8 states. A new generation was learning how to verify, how to check facts, and how to demand genuine accountability from leaders. This was not revolutionary, but rather incremental change, the way democracy actually works when it works properly. Present day. Jasmine Crockett's congressional office located in Dallas. The walls are covered with various framed letters from appreciative constituents. One particular letter, written in shaky handwriting, is prominently displayed. Dear Congresswoman Crockett, I am 85 years old, a United States Army veteran of Korea, voted Republican my entire life. Voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020. Thank you for showing me what I should have checked myself. Thank you for defending my Social Security better than Trump defended America. You have my vote from now on. Respectfully, Herbert Johnston, SGT, U.S. Army. Crockett is reviewing another complex budget proposal, highlighter firmly in hand when her phone rings showing an unknown number. She answers the call. Congresswoman Crockett, this is Tom Reynolds. I was at that Trump rally in Des Moines, the one where people held the signs. Yes, I remember. I was one of them holding a sign. His voice was rough, identifying him as a working-class individual from the Midwest. I am 68, a retired factory worker. I voted for Trump twice. Crockett listened intently. That night at the Fox Town Hall, when you showed those budgets, I didn't want to believe it. I got incredibly angry. Called you names online, said you were lying. He paused briefly. But 6 months later, my wife said, Tom, just look it up. Go to the government website, see for yourself. So we did. We looked up the actual documents, the FY 2020 budget. Found it right on the OMB website. Another pause, this one significantly longer. Everything you said was true. Every number, every cut, all of it. Crockett waited silently for him to continue. So we made a sign, went to his rally, and just stood there. Didn't yell, didn't make a scene, just stood there with the truth. Mr. Reynolds, I wanted to say thank you for not letting him lie without consequences, for making me check for myself. His voice audibly caught, for treating us like we deserved the truth, even when we didn't want to hear it. Mr. Reynolds, you did that yourself. You checked, you verified, you stood up. That is citizenship, that is what democracy looks like. Yeah. A long exhale came through the phone line. I guess it is. Wish I'd done it sooner. You did it when it mattered. That is what counts. They said goodbye and Crockett hung up the phone. She sat motionless for a moment, looking at the complex budget document in front of her. Another proposal, another set of promises that might not ultimately match reality. She picked up her highlighter and got back to work. Because the work never stops. Politicians will keep making promises, budgets will keep being proposed, and someone always has to check if the words actually match the actions. Not with the intent to destroy, not to humiliate, but simply to verify, to document, and to hold leaders accountable. That is the job. That is the fundamental responsibility. That is democracy.